Hello everyone, welcome back to BRHR series. Grab your drink, pull up a chair. This is episode 5 Performance Management Moving Beyond Annual Reviews. In this episode, we are going to talk about 5 major points. Point number 1 Continuous feedback culture. Point number 2 OKRs versus KPIs. OKR here is nothing but objective key result, KPI is nothing but key performance indicator. Point number 3 Coaching versus evaluation. Point number 4 How companies like Adobe eliminated annual reviews. Point number 5 Building accountability without fear. Let's dive into point number 1 Continuous feedback culture. Let me take you back to a familiar scene. It is the end of the year. An employee walks into a room for their annual performance review. They are nervous. Their manager has a document open, notes collected over the past 12 months. Feedback is delivered, ratings are discussed, salary adjustments are mentioned, and then what happened? Silence for another year. That used to be normal. But here is the problem work doesn't happen once a year. Why should feedback? Huh? Think about it. About a decade ago, Adobe made a bold move. They eliminated annual performance reviews. No more forced rankings, no more once a year evaluations. Instead, they introduced something called check ins. Managers were encouraged to have regular, informal conversations about expectations, progress, development, career growth. Goal wasn't to judge, it was to guide. And what happened then? Voluntary turnover dropped significantly. Engagement improved. Managers reported better team alignment. Because feedback became part of the workflow, not a formal event. Continuous feedback aligns perfectly with how modern companies operate, especially in tech world. Take Microsoft. During its culture transformation under Satya Nadella, Microsoft moved away from stack ranking systems and toward growth focused conversations. The shift was intentional. Instead of asking, how did you perform compared to others? You know what they have asked? What did you learn? How can we improve? What support do you need? This shift encourages collaboration over competition. When feedback becomes ongoing, improvement becomes continuous, and improvement drives innovation. Why continuous feedback works? Let's break it down. Annual feedback is backward looking. Continuous feedback is a forward looking. It reduces surprises. It corrects mistakes early. It reinforces positive behavior in real time. Research from Gallup consistently shows that employees who receive frequent feedback are more engaged and more productive. Why? Because clarity reduces anxiety. If I know how am I doing today, I don't fear what might be said about me in December. Feedback becomes coaching, not judgment. But here is the truth. You can't just announce a continuous feedback and expect it to work. It requires cultural change. Managers must feel comfortable giving constructive input. Employees must feel receiving it. This connects directly to psychological safety. Feedback only works in an environment of trust. If feedback feels like criticism, people resist it. If it feels like investment, people embrace it. Now imagine a workplace without consistent feedback. An employee struggles in silently, mistakes repeat, frustration builds, or worse, an employee excels but receives no recognition. They assume their effort doesn't matter. Both scenarios lead to disengagement. Silence is not neutral, it is a damaging. So, what a true continuous feedback culture looks like? Let's look into that. First of all, it is not micromanagement. It is short, regular one on ones, clear goal alignment, real time recognition, constructive course correction, two-way dialogue. Feedback flows both directions. Managers coach, employees share ideas, teams adjust quickly. In fast moving industries, waiting 12 months to adjust performance is too late. Continuous feedback keeps teams agile. Bottom line is, world of work has changed. Projects move fast, markets shift quickly, skills evolve consistently. Uh, Performance management must keep up. Continuous feedback isn't about talking more, it is about improving faster. Organizations like Adobe, Microsoft, and Deloitte realize something powerful. Performance improves when conversations are frequent, honest, and future focused. Because when feedback is continuous, growth becomes continuous. And when growth becomes continuous, so does performance. Let's look at point number two of this episode, OKRs versus KPIs. OKR is nothing but objective key result, KPI is nothing but key performance indicator. Let me start with a simple situation. Imagine a sales team. At the end of the quarter, the leader says, our KPI was a $5 million in revenue. We hit $5.2 million. What a great job. That is success. Now imagine a different conversation. The leader says, our objective is to become the most customer trusted brand in our region. One key result, achieve a 90% customer satisfaction score. Another key result, reduce customer response time to under 2 hours. That feels different, right? That is a difference between KPIs and OKRs. One measures performance, the other drives ambition. Let's begin with KPIs, key performance indicators. KPIs are metrics that track how well you are performing against defined targets. Think revenue growth, customer churn rate, operating margin, production efficiency. Companies like Coca Cola rely heavily on KPIs to monitor global operations. They track distribution efficiency, market share, cost management, and sales performance across regions. Why? Because large organizations need operational stability, KPIs act like a scoreboard. They tell you, are we on track? Are we profitable? Are we efficient? Without KPIs, you are flying blind. But here's a limitation, KPIs often measure what already exists. They maintain performance, they don't always transform it. Now let's talk about OKRs, objectives and key results. OKRs were popularized by Intel and later adopted and scaled by Google. At Google, OKRs are public inside the company. Everyone can see leadership goals and team goals. Here is how they work. Objective, a bold, qualitative goal. Key results, specific, measurable outcomes that define success. For example, objective, launch the best mobile experience in the market. What is the key result? Increase app speed by 30%, achieve 4.8 plus app store rating, reduce crash rate below 1%. OKRs push teams to think bigger. They are not about maintaining performance, they are about stretching it. And here is something interesting about Google's approach. Achieving 70% of an OKR is often considered success. Why? Because OKRs are designed to be ambitious. If you hit 100% every time, your goals weren't bold enough. Now imagine what happens when a company confuses KPIs and OKRs. A manager sets revenue as an OKR, but it is actually a KPI. The team plays it safe. They aim for certainty instead of innovation. Or the opposite. A company tries to run daily operations purely on OKRs without stable KPIs. Chaos follows. Operational metrics suffer. What was the key insight? KPIs sustain the business. OKRs grow the business. They are not competitors, they are complements. During Microsoft cultural transformation, Microsoft leaned into growth oriented thinking. Instead of a rigid performance comparisons, teams focus more on learning goals and forward progress. But Microsoft didn't eliminate KPIs. Financial metrics, product performance, and operational efficiency still mattered. What changed was the addition of ambitious, forward looking goals layered on top of operational stability. That is a sweet spot. Think of it this way, imagine a car. KPIs are your dashboard, fuel level, speed, engine temperature. They tell you if the vehicle is functioning properly. OKRs are your destination. They define where you are trying to go and how boldly you are willing to drive. You need both. If you only watch the dashboard, you never choose a new destination. If you only focus on the destination, you might ignore engine warnings. Let's see when to use each. Use KPIs when you want operational consistency, performance tracking, predictability, accountability. Use OKRs when you want innovation, strategic shifts, cultural alignment, ambitious growth. And the most effective organizations clearly communicate the difference because confusion creates frustration, clarity creates alignment. Bottom line is KPIs tell you how you are performing. OKRs challenge you to perform better. KPIs protect the present, OKRs build the future. The most successful companies from Intel to Google to Microsoft understand that growth requires both discipline and ambition. Measure what matters, but also dare to aim higher. Because in the end, sustainable performance isn't just about maintaining numbers, it is about moving them forward. 3. Let's dive into point number 3 of this episode, coaching versus evaluation. Let me paint a picture. An employee walks into a meeting room. They know it is performance review day. They sit down, their manager opens a document. There is a rating, maybe a 3 out of 5. The conversation focuses on what went wrong. There is a comparison to peers. A salary decision follows. The employee leaves thinking, I hope I survive next year. That is evaluation. Now imagine a different conversation. Same employee, same manager. But this time the manager says, let's talk about your goals. Where do you want to grow? What support do you need? What skills should we build next? The employee leaves thinking, I feel invested in. That is coaching. The difference isn't subtle, it is cultural. A powerful example comes from Adobe. Several years ago, Adobe realized their traditional performance reviews were creating stress, not growth. Managers were spending enormous time filling out forms and assigning ratings. Employees had dreaded the process. So Adobe eliminated annual reviews and replaced them with continuous check-ins. The focus shifted from evaluation to coaching. Instead of asking, how did you perform last year compared to others? They started asking, what are you working on now? What challenges are you facing? How can I help you? Then, what was the result? Voluntary attrition dropped significantly. Engagement increased. Managers spent more time developing people instead of documenting them. Adobe understood something critical. When performance systems feel like judgment, people protect themselves. When they feel like coaching, people improve. Now let's be clear. Evaluation is not useless. Organizations need accountability. They need to make compensation decisions. They need to identify underperformance. But here is a trap. When evaluation dominates the conversation, development disappears. Employees begin optimizing for ratings instead of improvement. They avoid risks. They hide weaknesses. They play it safe. And safe cultures rarely innovate. Here is the real difference between coaching versus evaluation. Evaluation says this is how you did. Coaching says this is how you can improve. Evaluation measures value. Coaching builds value. Evaluation is episodic. Coaching is continuous. And here is something important. You cannot coach effectively if employees fear being judged constantly. Psychological safety plays a role here. People open up about challenges when they trust that the conversation is about growth, not penalty. Look at elite sports teams. Great coaches review performance, yes, but they spend most of their time helping athletes get better. They analyze a technique, they give real time feedback, they refine strengths. They don't just score the game, they prepare for the next one. Organizations that adopt a coaching mindset treat performance as a dynamic, not static. Bottom line is, evolution answers the question, where do you stand? Coaching answers the question, where can you go? Both matter. But if you want engagement, innovation, and long term growth, coaching must dominate the culture because people don't improve when they feel labeled, they improve when they feel supported. And the companies that win, like Adobe, Microsoft, and Deloitte, have realized something powerful. Performance management isn't about judging people once a year, it is about developing them every day. Let's discuss the point number 4 of this episode, how Adobe eliminated annual reviews and what happened next. Let me take you inside a familiar corporate ritual. It is December. Managers are stressed, employees are anxious, spreadsheets are open, ratings are being debated. Some employees are labeled top performers, others are quietly categorized as average. And no matter how hard someone worked all year, their entire contribution is reduced to a number. That was the reality at Adobe about a decade ago. And the leadership started asking a hard question. Is this actually improving performance or just exhausting everyone? Adobe realized that their traditional annual review system was costing them heavily, not just financially, but culturally. Managers were spending thousands of hours preparing evaluations. Employees were dreading the process, and worst of all, high performers were leaving. Why? Because the system felt rigid and backward looking. Feedback was delivered once a year. Compensation discussions were tied to ratings. Employees felt judged instead of developed. So Adobe did something bold. They eliminated annual performance reviews. No more forced rankings, no more once a year ratings. Instead, they introduced a new model called check ins. New system was simple but powerful. Managers were expected to have ongoing, informal conversations with their team members throughout the year. These conversations focused on three things: expectations, feedback, growth, and development. Instead of waiting 12 months to discuss performance, feedback became continuous. Instead of comparing employees to one another, managers focused on individual progress, and instead of labeling performance once a year, compensation discussions became more flexible and merit based. And the impact was significant. Voluntary attrition dropped, engagement improved, managers reported stronger relationships with their teams, but perhaps most importantly, the tone of performance conversations changed. Employees no longer felt like they were being judged once a year, they felt supported throughout the year, and when feedback is frequent, there are fewer surprises. Small issues get corrected early, strengths get reinforced immediately, performance becomes a dynamic, not static. Adobe's success inspired other organizations to rethink their approach. Microsoft moved away from stack ranking systems and embraced a growth mindset culture. Deloitte simplified its performance management process after discovering managers were spending hundreds of thousands of hours on evaluation forms with little return. Across industries, leaders began realizing something. Annual reviews were designed for a slower era. Today's workplace moves fast, projects shift quickly, roles evolve constantly. Waiting 12 months to give meaningful feedback simply doesn't work anymore. Annual reviews had three major flaws of failing. Number one, recency bias. Managers often remembered only the last few months. Fear driven conversations. Rating created anxiety and defensiveness. Administrative burden. Documentation consumed time that could have been spent coaching. Employees started optimizing for ratings rather than improvement. Innovation slowed because people avoided risk, and managers felt like evaluators instead of coaches. How Adobe model work? Here is the key insight. Adobe didn't remove accountability. They removed rigidity. The new model required frequent check-ins, clear expectations, honest conversations, manager ownership of development. It placed the responsibility on leaders to engage continuously, not annually, but that also required training. Managers had to learn how to give constructive feedback regularly because eliminating annual reviews only works if you replace them with real conversations. So the lesson isn't just to remove annual reviews. The lesson is this: performance management should develop people, not label them. When feedback is continuous, employees grow faster, trust is strengthens, surprises decrease, engagement increases. Adobe proved that when you shift from evaluation to conversation, performance improves because people don't thrive under judgment, they thrive under guidance. And in today's fast moving world, growth can't wait for December. It has to happen every week. That is a real transformation Adobe sparked, not just removing a system, but redefining how performance conversations should feel. Let's look at point number 5 of this episode: building accountability without fear. Let me start with the two very different workplaces. In the first one, people are careful. They double check emails 3 times. They avoid taking risks. They don't speak up in meetings unless they are 100% certain. Why? Because mistakes are punished publicly. Accountability here feels like blame. Now, the second workplace. Deadlines are clear, expectations are high. But when something goes wrong, the question isn't who did this, it is what can we learn. That is accountability without fear. And the difference between these two environments determines whether a company merely survives or truly innovates. Let's look at Netflix. Netflix is famous for its culture of freedom and responsibility. They give employees significant autonomy, flexible policies, fewer approvals, and high decision making authority. But here is the key: freedom comes with clear accountability. Performance expectations are explicit. High performance is non negotiable. Netflix doesn't micromanage, but they are transparent about standards. If performance doesn't meet expectations consistently, they address it directly. No fear tactics, no public shaming, just clarity. The message is simple: we trust you to perform at a high level and we will support you. But accountability is part of that trust. That balance builds maturity, not anxiety. Accountability without fear is critical in healthcare. Hospitals that operate under blame cultures often see medical errors hidden or unreported. But research has shown that organizations that create just cultures where errors are analyzed without automatic punishment see improved safety outcomes. It is not about ignoring mistakes, it is about distinguishing between negligence and learning. I- If every error leads to punishment, people hide problems. If errors lead to structured learning, systems improve. That is accountability in action without fear paralyzing progress. True accountability requires two things: clear expectations, psychological safety. If expectations are unclear, accountability feels unfair. If safety is missing, accountability feels threatening. The most effective leaders define these three things: what success looks like, what standards must be met, what behaviors are unacceptable. But they also create a space for dialogue. Employees should be able to say, I am struggling, I made a mistake, I need support, without fearing humiliation. What accountability without fear looks like? It looks like clear goals and measurable outcomes, regular performance conversations, immediate feedback, learning reviews after failures, respectful but direct communication. It does not look like public shaming, surprise performance reviews, vague expectations, avoiding tough conversations. Fear based cultures create compliance. Trust based accountability creates commitment, and commitment drives performance beyond minimum standards. Bottom line is, accountability isn't the enemy of empathy. In fact, the strongest cultures combine high expectations plus high support. When people know what is expected and feel safe enough to admit challenges, they step up. They don't hide, they don't deflect, they improve. Companies like Netflix, Microsoft, and Toyota demonstrate something powerful. You don't need fear to drive results. You need clarity, you need trust, you need a leadership that says, we expect excellence and we will help you achieve it. That is accountability without fear. And that is how performance cultures are built sustainably. Let me conclude episode 5 of BRHR series. We challenge the traditional annual review and explore why performance systems should develop people, not judge them. From continuous feedback cultures to the difference between KPIs and OKRs. We unpack how modern organizations are shifting toward coaching driven conversations. Learn how Adobe eliminated annual reviews, how Microsoft embraced growth mindset over stack ranking, and how Netflix balances freedom with accountability. The takeaway: high performance doesn't require fear, it requires clarity, trust, and consistent dialogue that fuels of real growth. Thanks for listening to Be a